Hello, and welcome to the House of Lore. Tonight, we begin with a tale older than memory, older than the names of rivers, older than fire carried in hushed silence across the frost-bitten plains. The story of how the bond between humans and wolves first began to stir, deep in a world of snow and silence. Before villages, before words carved into record, there were the long, wandering nights of the Ice Age. Nomadic bands of humans drifted across frozen tundras, following the herds, following survival. Wrapped in hides, faces weather-worn, and eyes sharp with knowing, they moved with the winds, shaped by the rhythms of the land. At their fires, glowing dim against the immensity of night, they shared warmth and silence, and the scent of roasted meat that curled upward into the frozen stars. But they were not alone there. Just beyond the reach of firelight, shapes lingered, cautious, silent, watching. Wolves, drawn by scent, by hunger perhaps, or curiosity that lingered just longer than it should have. They circled at a distance, pale shapes, sliding between the trees, blending into the hush of snow. The humans saw them, glimpses, eyeshine caught in the darkness, a furtive shadow brushing the edge of the clearing. And yet, they did not always chase them away. A stray bone tossed aside, the scent of old marrow. Perhaps it began with that, because as much as humans observed wolves, the wolves were watching too. They studied strange figures with upright stances, who carried fire in bowls and voices shaped by story. And what a curious thing it must have been, to see these two-legged creatures tame the sweep of night. Perhaps the wolves, with their quiet instinct, noticed more than we think. They saw cooperation, sharing. They saw how humans worked together to encircle a mammoth, how they cared for their injured, how they piled furs over fragile bodies when the winds howled too long. And maybe, just maybe, they recognized something familiar in that. So there they lingered, outside the glow. Not packmates, not yet, but not strangers either. Now and then, a younger wolf, bolder than the rest, would slink closer. Perhaps the humans let them near, or perhaps they simply didn't mind. Not every time, a sleep-heavy child might glance at pale eyes beyond the flames and fall quietly into dreaming. There's something timeless in that image. Two species, wild and watchful, inching toward one another in the vast quiet of prehistory. Over time, patterns began to shift. Wolves who lingered near camps grew more accustomed to the rhythms of human movement. And humans, wise observers of survival, began to see the patterns in wolf behavior, the sharpness of their senses, the power in their chase. Still, there was no spoken pact, no sudden choice. This was no domestication in a breath. This was companionship that began like a distant echo, slow, tentative, shaped by long winters and quiet nights. Two lives, drawn together not by force, but by curiosity. And in that space, that gentle watching, there flickered the first glimmer of something new. A closeness that neither truly understood, and yet each found themselves leaning toward the other. The wolf, no longer just a predator in the dark, and the human, no longer alone before the ancient wind. Thank you for joining me here, at the edge of the very beginning. If you're finding peace in these quiet tales, you might mark this place or share it with someone else seeking rest. There's always room in the House of Law. Each night, the fire becomes a threshold between two worlds. Ours, the one we built from stone, from ash, from fear and need. And theirs, older, quieter, and not ours to control. In the hush of early dusk, when the last of the smoke drifts upward from a meal cooked over glowing coals, the wolves begin to arrive, not with noise or boasting, but with silence, with patience. They come not to hunt, not yet, but to watch, to listen. Their approach is always slow, deliberate. Soft pause on pine needles, the stillness of breath held back. You wouldn't know they were near unless you looked hard enough into the shadows that gather beyond the firelight's edge. At first, they come only at night, drawn by the scent of charred bones and discarded skins, cooking fat soaked into dirt and stone. Not much to us, leftovers really, but to them, it's enough. Just enough to tempt a foot closer through the dark. The scout, low to the ground, edging closer to what we leave behind. Sometimes we watch them from across the fire, both of us frozen in the moment, still and quiet, separated by that flickering orange wall. Some wolves keep their distance. They take what they can without stepping too near, waiting until the glow dies and only embers whisper in the night. Others are bolder. You start to notice the difference over time. The more cautious ones, they sniff and circle, never quite breaching the imaginary line where the fire's glow fades. But the others, those with nothing to lose perhaps, wait until your back is turned. Closer, faster. You begin to wonder, how many pairs of eyes have watched from the dark as you slept? How many steps just short of the clearing have been erased by the soft crumble of morning frost? It is not always clear which wolves are dangerous. Fur doesn't betray intent, and stillness is no guarantee. You have to feel it instead. The tension in the quiet. There is a kind of weight to an aggressive presence. A hush too deep and sharp to be mere patience. And other times, there's something different. A gentler wolf, lying low near the refuse heap, yellow eyes half closed against the wind. Not brave, not cowed, just waiting, tolerating us as we tolerate them. Selective on both sides. We permit one another to be. Not out of trust, perhaps, but from an unspoken agreement, a mutual recognition of the fire between us. They learn our routines, and we learn their habits. Which nights we throw out bones, which gatherings leave behind the most to pick through and chew, which faces by the flames glance warily over shoulders, and which never notice at all. Survival makes strange neighbors. The wolves are not only threats, and not only symbols. They're part of an old pattern, of quiet watches, drawn not to us, but to what we leave behind. None make the first move in haste, because the dance across this line, the blaze between wild and walled, must be slow. Neither side wants to undo what thin allowances time has built. So we keep an eye on the tree line, and they keep an eye on us through the flicker of firelight. As the days grew long, and the embers of cook fires shimmered under ancient stars, humans, our ancestors, began to notice something curious. Among the shadows circling camp edges, not all wolves moved with the same sharp watchfulness. Some lingered a little longer, ears forward, tails low, yet not tucked. There were those with boldness, not born of threat, but of gentleness, a willingness to come a step closer, to watch without snarling, to listen, even when the forest remained silent. These wolves, softer of eye and quieter of tread, held something different inside them. In the warmth of the fires and the mess of discarded food, some found an easier life. No need to chase the wind for a rabbit, if marrowed bone lay waiting in the ash. Humans, bound by their own instincts for watchfulness, began to tolerate these quieter shapes. They sensed no danger in the ones that didn't growl, that didn't bare teeth, but sat instead with heads bowed and eyes lowered. It was not trust, not yet. It was something smaller, simpler, a test of nearness. And so, generation upon generation, those with gentler natures were the ones that remained closest. The ones that flinched, vanished back into the dark. Those that stayed, left behind the marks of their courage, the courage to be calm. As these wolves returned night after night, they became something else, not in stride or silhouette, but in spirit. The silent agreement between species to exist near one another without fear. It was the boldness of the team, the quiet bravery, passed from mother to pup, carried like a secret in the blood. Human children would see these animals not as strangers, but as constant features of their small worlds. The watchers at the woodline, the silent shapes beyond the tents. Some young wolves, perhaps even played, snapped at shadows not far from firelight, followed laughter with curious steps. Over time, people began to recognize them not as wolves, but as something slightly different. Not yet dogs, not yet companions, just a presence, comfortable in the spaces between wild and home, between instinct and invitation. No cage, no leash, only the rhythm of mutual benefit, and the gift of being left in peace. As tameness settled into the bones, as hearts quieted through generations, the path forward began to unfold, slow as dew, gentle as sleep. Around flickering campfires, beneath the ancient twilight, the bond between humans and dogs grew slowly, but steadily. Long before collars, before fences or names, there were watchful eyes in the shadows, canine eyes. They sat just beyond the light's edge, silent, attentive, waiting. Not owned, not tamed, but near. They listened to the forest's low rustles, to the breathing of the trees, and to the subtle rhythms of danger. For early humans, sleep was never truly safe. But with these animals nearby, something changed. The first guardians arrived. Dogs, or their early ancestors, began to live alongside humans. Not in words, but in presence. They heard what we could not, a twig cracked far off, a distant howl, the silent pads of a predator on the move, and they warned us, with a growl, with ears poised, or with a sudden stillness that meant more than sound ever could. In time, people began to notice. The ones who lingered at the campfire, these four-legged watchers, made sleep a little deeper, a little longer. They gave us peace in a restless world. Cold nights were easier too. When wind rushed through the trees and sparks flew skyward, warmth mattered. Huddled beneath firs, Early humans began to share more than firelight with their companions. Bodies pressed close, humans and dogs side by side. Heat shared hand to paw, skin to fur. In this closeness, a new kind of survival emerged. Not just protection, not just shelter, but something in between. Trust built with time and touch. As daylight returned, and hunters took up their spears, another layer of companionship unfolded. Not every animal close to humans helped in the chase, but those who did became more than guardians. They became partners. A deer's trail underfoot, scattered leaves, broken moss. A dog's nose led the way. Where the human eye missed, the dog sensed, smelled, knew. Together, they tracked in stillness, in silence, man and beast, moving as one. The hunt itself changed. Strategies adjusted to the dog's skills, to their quick feet, to their ability to chase or corner. And when food was scarce, that partnership meant more than efficiency. It meant survival. A kill could be made because a dog had barked, or ran, or waited, perfectly still. And in return, they were fed, meat shared, bones given, grub unearthed from the fire's edge, passed in a quiet ritual between species. There was no contract, only the deep yet silent understanding. I see you, and you see me. Every hunt, every night spent near the fire, wove that thread a little tighter. Shelter meant more than walls or caves. It was where these beings gathered close, where warmth was shared, and so was life. Even now, on cold nights when animals curve into circles near our feet, or edge up beside us in their quiet way, we are echoing something ancient, a memory deep in bone, that once, to make it through the dark, we were not alone. We listened as they listened. We moved as they moved. And with each shared breath beneath the stars, dogs helped keep the wildness at bay, gently, faithfully, without ever needing to say a word. As the world slowly shifted, so did the creatures that lived close by our side. Among the most faithful of those were dogs. In every corner of the world they followed us, through deserts, across mountains, along frozen rivers and into humid forests. As humans began to settle, crafting homes from stone, soil, and timber, the dogs settled too. And in time, they began to change. Not all at once, of course. It was a quiet evolution, shaped by wind and terrain, by the needs of the people, and the rhythm of the land. In the cold, harsh stretches of the Arctic, dogs with thick, double-layered coats became indispensable. Huskies and Malamutes, their bodies lean yet strong, padded through the snow, pulling sleds and guarding camps, their breath rising like mist into the polar twilight. Far to the south, other dogs thrived in very different conditions. In sandy deserts, where winds whisper through dunes, Salukis and Basenjis proved themselves nimble and swift, their lean bodies built for speed, their endurance shaped by pursuit under a blazing sun. In hills dense with forest, and moors brushed by fog, shepherding breeds rose quietly from the land. Collies, clever-eyed and sure-footed, learned the pulse of flocks, guiding sheep with an innate understanding of order and quiet instinct. On the wide steppes of Central Asia, great mastiff-like dogs stood beside nomadic tribes, Tall, broad, calm, they kept watch as tents stirred in the winds, protecting against would-be thieves and wild predators alike. Even in cities, where cobbled streets replaced soft earth, dogs found new tasks. Smaller breeds flourished here, terriers and spaniels who stayed close, navigating narrow alleys and hearth-warmed parlors. Across rice paddies and bamboo groves of East Asia, the loyal Shiba and Tosa took shape. Quiet, composed, a reflection of the cultures that raised them, simultaneously guardians and companions. And in lush rainforests, dogs adapted for scent, sharp-nosed and agile, helped their people through dense undergrowth, alerting them to danger or game. The dogs of each region did more than simply fulfill roles. Over generations, their bodies and temperaments, their instincts and habits, grew alongside us. They became mirrors of our environment and our way of life. It was not just survival, it was partnership. Sometimes, it was the terrain that shaped them. Sometimes, it was the task. But always, it was the bond. A dog in the mountains would not look or act like a dog from the marshes. Yet all were kin, tied back to a common ancestor, now changed slightly by wind and duty and time. These differences were not just appearance, they were purpose, an expression of need met by nature. In the quiet dawns and long evenings, in warmth and in frost, dogs learn to serve in many ways. As guides, protectors, helpers, friends. Even now, when many no longer herd or protect flocks, or pull sleds through snow, we can still see the purpose in their eyes, and the roles they once played. Every tail wag, every alert glance to the horizon, echoes with thousands of years of loyalty and adaptation. Full paws, many roles, so many forms from so many places, yet still, always, man's calm and steady companion. Dogs have always been close, so close, they followed where we walked. Long ago, when the world stretched wide and unknown before our ancestors, dogs were there, walking quietly at their side. They were not leashed, and yet not wild. They chose to stay near, and as humans began to migrate, chasing warmer winds or new hunting grounds, dogs followed, sometimes behind, sometimes ahead, but always near. Together, they moved into new lands, through icy passes, across dry plains exposed to unrelenting sun, over mountains blanketed in silence and snow. The world was changing, but the companionship held steady. Dogs were remarkably adaptable, shifting, learning, surviving. Some grew thick fur to weather cold air. Others became sleek, better suited to heat that shimmered like glass. They adjusted not just to climate, but to the prey and predators of each place. Some became quiet hunters alongside their humans, moving low through brush and the dawn mist. Others learned the sense of danger, warning their companions of rustling in the dark. Dogs adapted their coats, their diets, even the shape of their limbs. Sled dogs emerged in the Arctic North, lean, tireless, able to cross frozen rivers when no bridge could be built. In other regions, small, sharp-eyed terriers darted through thickets to flush prey and keep the group fed. When people took to boats and crossed into islands, dogs went too, their paws trading soil for wood. No scrolls record their names, but in every land where people settled, evidence remains. Bones buried with care, paintings in ash and rock, stories passed quietly of creatures who guarded the fireside. In each case, dogs were more than tools. They were souls that helped guide the journey. When people navigated by the stars and sought unknown shores, dogs shared their vision with the senses we lacked, hearing a shift in the wind, or sensing animals before they were seen. And when the dark grew deep, when strange lands were filled with things not yet understood, dogs watched, not with fear, but with calm alertness. They helped ease anxiety by simply being there, whether wrapped in furs by the fire or standing with ears perked at a rustle in the trees. Dogs did what they had always done. They stayed close. Some protected the sleeping, others herded game, or gave gentle warnings with soft growls too quiet to wake the camp, but just enough to still a wandering toddler. In time, the bond grew deeper. Wherever people went, dogs followed. Not because they had to, but because they chose to. And their role, though never written in maps or king's records, remained vital. Dogs helped people spread across continents. But more than that, they helped them feel less alone. Side by side, across snowfields, jungles, deserts, villages, dogs shaped the human journey, gently, softly, without ever asking for much in return, except maybe to remain close. And still, they walk beside us, even now. Dogs have walked beside us for thousands of years, their paws tracing quiet paths through the heart of ancient civilizations. In the lands of Mesopotamia, amid clay tablets and ziggurats, dogs were more than companions. They stood between the known and the unknown, watchers at doorways both physical and spiritual. Some guarded homes, others guarded temples. Silent sentinels, often lying in doorways, watching with softened eyes. The ancient Sumerians and Akkadians etched their history onto tablets in cuneiform, and through these records, we find dogs serving a remarkable purpose. In temples dedicated to Gula, the goddess of healing, dogs were sacred. She was often portrayed with faithful canines at her feet, symbols of restoration and comfort. People would approach her temple with hope, and perhaps, as they prayed, a dog would lie quietly nearby, not judging, not claiming, just being. A presence, a whisper of life, alongside human pain and prayer. Dogs were healers of the heart then, as they are now. Some Mesopotamian myths tell of fierce guardian dogs, stationed at the gates of the netherworld, loyal and tireless, keeping peace across worlds. These dogs didn't bark. There is little mention of sound in their descriptions. Instead, it was their gaze, their posture, that held power. As time drifted like the Tigris and Euphrates, so too did dogs follow human steps into Egyptian sands. In ancient Egypt, the dog was both companion and keeper of sacred order. The desert winds carried more than just songs and secrets. They carried the scent of jackals, scavengers of the barren lands, and with them, the genesis of Anubis. Anubis was no ordinary figure. Shown with a black canine head, he presided over tombs and thresholds. A god of embalming, of the space between breaths. Dogs, or more often jackal-like creatures, came to represent the guardianship of souls. Funerary art shows dogs lying still beside burial chambers, quiet in their watch. Not feral, not wild, but serene. as if they understood the silence inside walls of stone. Egyptians had names for their pets, carved into stelae and scribbled in tombs. Names like Brave One or Reliable. They were memorialized, not as animals, but as familial spirits. Some shared meals with nobles, others hunted across open land, their paws stirring dust in ancient light. Hunting scenes are often found on papyrus and murals. Lean dogs with long legs and narrow faces, charging toward gazelle and hare. These dogs were not bred for comfort, they were bred to move, to vanish into the landscape and return unshaken. Their silence speaking of speed. And in Greece, where olive trees curled under warm skies, dogs took on new meanings. To the Greeks, dogs were both affectionate companions and steadfast tools. You'll find them painted on vases, curled at the feet of Odysseus, waiting, always waiting. There was Argos, the dog who recognized his master after 20 long years, the only one who did. And upon seeing him, Argos closed his eyes and passed into sleep, a quiet myth for a quiet friend. There were the Molossian hounds, large commanding creatures bred in Epirus, strong enough to guard flocks and homes, yet trusted enough to sleep among children. Soldiers took them to battle. Philosophers wrote of their bravery. Aristotle classified them. Xenophon, the hunter, praised them. In rituals, dogs were given as offerings to Hecate, the goddess of crossroads and hidden things. Black dogs were especially tied to her presence, often accompanying her in myth as silent travelers between worlds. These creatures never spoke aloud in legend, yet their meaning echoed wider than words. In all three cultures, Mesopotamian, Egyptian, and Greek, dogs were a part of the unseen mechanism, working gently alongside the sacred flow of life. They hunted and protected. They waited and watched. Their role was always present, never loud, never absent. The more we listen to these old stories, the more we notice that dogs were not only shaped by humans, but also, in soft ways, they shaped us. They taught patience, loyalty, the kind of courage that doesn't need to roar. Tonight, as you rest, imagine them beside the hearth of some ancient home, outside a quiet temple, walking through ruins under stars, one paw after the other, in silence. Soft paw prints in the dust of ancient places still echo in the stories we've told for generations. Dogs have long been more than companions, more than hunters, more than guardians of the home. They have been symbols of loyalty, of courage, of something just beyond the veil of the everyday. In many early societies, dogs were the bridge between the known and the unknown. Their eyes, it was said, could see what ours could not. Let's walk slowly now, through memory and myth, and listen for the padding of paws beside us. Across countless cultures, the dog's presence in storytelling is steady and deep. In ancient Greece, the figure of Argos, the dog of Odysseus, waited faithfully for 20 years, eyes dim with age, still holding on to hope, until his master returned. He recognized Odysseus, even in disguise, and only then closed his eyes for the final time. His loyalty was so complete, so entire, that it outlasted even time itself. And in Norse belief, there is the tale of Garma, a mighty hound who stood guard at the gates of hell. Not a beast of evil, but a guardian of balance, watching the boundary between this world and what comes after. Dogs often stood precisely at this line, between life and what lies just beyond it. In Celtic folklore, the hounds of the other world roamed beneath the moon, white-coated, red-eared. They were not of this earth, and to hear their howls was to know the presence of something other. They guarded sacred paths, chased away spirits, and sometimes even led the lost back toward the light. In Mesoamerican belief, the Zoloid's Quintly, or Zolo, a hairless dog, was more than a companion. To the peoples of the Aztec and Maya cultures, this dog was a spiritual guide, one who led the souls of the dead across the dark river to the land of the ancestors. Without the dog, the crossing could not be made. So often, dogs were seen as helpers of the soul's journey, known in ancient Egypt too, where jackal-like Anubis, god of embalming and protector of tombs, is shown with a dog's head, or a desert hound, guiding the spirit through the weighing of the heart. No fear, only watchful calm, as the dog walks beside the departed. In Zoroastrian rituals, dogs were sacred witnesses. When death approached, two dogs, ideally with 4 eyes, or markings that resembled such, would look upon the departed, helping to ensure that no evil spirit lingered. Their own gaze was a guard of the soul. Even in the quieter tales passed by firelight, dogs appear again and again, guides through forests thick with shadow, companions who know which path is true. They never speak, and yet they seem to understand. In Japanese folklore, the inugami, or dog spirit, could be protector or curse-bringer, depending how it was treated in life and ritual. These spirits were not feared for their power alone, but respected as beings who remembered. Memory itself seems to live in the dog's long gaze. Perhaps this is why, even as empires rose and fell, even as gods shifted their faces between pantheons, the dog remained. Close to the fire, closer to the heart. They were symbols of loyalty, yes, but not simply blind loyalty. They were beings of instinct and trust, alert to both danger and truth. They heard what we could not hear, smelled what we did not smell, and so they stood watch. Not just over homes and herds, but over the soul's passage, over the quiet places where the worlds meet. As I close this portion tonight, I imagine the steady sound of paws, trailing gently beside us through the dark woods of story. Not lost, not hunted, only traveling. Until next time, sleep well, and dream softer than footsteps in snow. By the time dogs had become more than simple hunters or guards, something began to shift between them and the people they served. Across the fields of history, from royal palaces to humble farmyards, dogs found their place, not just at the heels of their masters, but beside them, as companions, as workers, and sometimes as symbols. Let's wander gently through the traces they left behind. At the courts of kings and queens, dogs lounged beneath brocade-draped tables, their coats tended as carefully as those of the aristocracy. Breeds like the greyhound, sleek, elegant, became emblems of nobility. They were painted into the corners of royal portraits, standing proud in tapestries and gracing family crests. A greyhound wasn't simply a dog, it was a statement, a quiet declaration that wealth, leisure, and refinement lived here. In England, during the Middle Ages, and well into the Tudor era, sumptuary laws often dictated who could own what, including certain breeds of dogs. The greyhound, again, was among those reserved for nobles. To casually possess one without the proper title could raise questions. It's telling how these animals, once valued for their skill in the chase, began to represent something else entirely. Lapdogs, tiny and delicate, were often seen in the arms of noblewomen. Breeds like the Papillon or the Maltese, carried close to the chest in silk purses or velvet wraps. They were less about work and more about presence, companionship, yes, but also display. These little dogs did serve some purpose, at least in belief. Some thought they drew illness away from their owners. Their warmth, their steady breathing, believed to calm nerve and spirit. Whether or not that was true didn't matter much. They held their place just the same. But step just beyond the castle walls, and you'd find dogs of a different sort. Among the fields and farmsteads, dogs had neither ribbon collars nor painted portraits. They were scruffier, lean where the others were soft, and they worked. The border collie, the sheepdog, the terrier charging down burrows. These breeds rose not from vanity, but necessity. In the early mornings, a shepherd would whistle low, and his dog would understand. Not a word spoken, yet flocks would move together as if choreographed. These dogs were partners, extensions of the hands that fed them, trusted in a way few others could be. But they too became more than just tools. At the stone doorstep of many cottages, you'd often find one curled beside the door, not just waiting for the next job, but staying because it knew this was home. A farmer might refer to his dog with affection deeper than for some neighbors, and when the day was slow, or storm clouds pressed low across the fields, man and dog would sit together in the barn's quiet, watching the rain. What began as service slowly softened, bonded, took root as something else. Even in town, dogs walked curbsides with butchers, followed children through market streets, keeping company without command. It wasn't only the lords and ladies who sought comfort in a pair of gentle eyes, or warm fur beside the hearth. Still, the divide remained visible. A noble's dog might dine on scraps from golden plates, while a ploughman's hound made do with bones and broth. But both, somehow, found their way into the affections of those who kept them. And with time, that bond would stretch further than status ever could. Rest here with that thought for a moment, gentle and still. The dog, as worker, as symbol, as beloved, and always as part of a story still unfolding. In the hush of a medieval night, when the last of the hearth fires dimmed, and the wind curled through stone passageways like breath through hollow flutes, there were still eyes that remained open. In castles and cottages alike, dogs stood sentinel. They were not merely animals within the walls of Europe's fortifications, but guardians, alert and ever watchful through hours of thick darkness. From the towering keeps of noble lords to humble wooden homes clustered beneath, dogs kept watch when no one else could. Some breeds, larger and more muscular, were stationed near entryways or tethered to outer gates. Their presence was a warning in itself, a signal that behind these stone walls, someone was ready. Their ears caught what no human could hear. Their noses followed trails long covered by leaf or snow, and their barks deep and sudden in the quiet, were like ripples across still water, rousing the sleeping world to attention. But these watchful eyes did more than protect. By daylight, they crossed fields beside their masters, knights and noble hunters, part of carefully trained parties bred for pursuit. In the dense woodlands, with morning mists hanging low, the thudding of hooves and the barking of hounds broke the stillness. Dogs ran ahead, their senses guiding humans through the underbrush. Each one knew its task: to flush the boar, to chase the deer, or to track the quiet rustle of a fleeing hare. These hunting companions were prized, sometimes given names far more elaborate than common folk would ever receive. And their care was a reflection of their importance. Fed better than many, housed in warm corners of the manor, patched and mended by the most skilled handlers. Some tapestries, still stitched into the stone halls, depict these scenes: noblemen in pursuit, hounds at their sides, leaping like shadows over the forest floor. But the Middle Ages were not always days of bright hunt and noble chase. There were years, long and grim, when the world felt still and breathless. In towns where the plague took root, and families closed shutters tight against breaking news, dogs often stayed. Some wandered, seeking out familiar faces and smells no longer there. Others remained by the side of their humans, lying near sick beds, silent, still. People who lost everything still whispered the names of their dogs. In the worst winters, dogs shared warmth by fire pits, curled beside straw mattresses, anchors against the weight of solitude. They became the comfort in an era so often marked by struggle, disease, and fear. Not only nobles kept such companions. Peasants, farmers, and stonemasons all knew the value of a loyal dog, often unnamed by history, but remembered in folk tales and quiet records. These were the animals that walked beside us when the fog was thick and the road ahead was uncertain. In literature of the time, dogs were not always romanticized, but they were present. The loyalty of a hound, the low whine of one sensing its master's absence, became symbols of something resilient, something enduring beneath the weight of a heavy age. And so, through the dark centuries, with torches flickering in narrow hallways, and footpaths tangled by ivy and thyme, the dogs remained, hunters, guardians, companions, unseen in most chronicles, absent from royal decrees or ecclesiastical commentaries, but vital to the rhythm of medieval life. As the church bell tolled the hour, as the cock crowed before sunrise, they rose, stretched, and sniffed the wind, ever watchful, ever nestled beside the humans who needed them most. Tonight, we travel far across the world, to distant places shaped by snow and sun, mountains and desert winds, where dogs have walked beside people for countless generations. Softly now, we'll start in the icy stretches of the northern continents, in the cold breath of the tundra, where silence can stretch for hours. The sled dog was not just companion, it was lifeline. The Alaskan Malamute, the Siberian Husky, their thick coats held off the deep chill, their powerful forms carried sleds across frozen rivers and layered snow. These were not pets in the common sense, but working kin, trusted with transporting food, medicine, sometimes entire families, over unforgiving land. They moved not by whip or command, but by partnership, rhythm, and instinct forged in generations of Arctic survival. They could sense breaking ice before a human ear could hear the subtle crack. They knew the path even when winds erased all traces of it. They were taught to lead, but also to think, to decide when to follow a trail, and when to save a life by refusing it. Now, leave the frost for the breath of the desert. Beneath open skies and over golden sands of North Africa, dogs walked alongside nomads and traders, not pulling sleds, but guarding caravans, watching the horizon. Some breeds were swift-footed watchers of livestock, like the slender Saluki, known as the royal dog of Egypt. Their grace had a hunter's speed, keeping pace with gazelles over dunes, or lying quietly in tents, content as shadow until needed. In the still parts of evening, with stars blinking above open fires, these animals rested near those they guarded, forming quiet circles of trust. Elsewhere in Africa, large dogs held their place at thresholds. With strong frames and intelligent eyes, they protected homes from danger, whether wild beast or unfamiliar steps in the night. They understood the scent of kin and the rhythms of village life. Now, drift slowly again, across the ocean, to the vast lands of the Americas. Long before roads or fences, dogs ran beside those who moved with the seasons. Among Native American tribes, their role was more than physical. They were seen as messengers, as mediators between people in the spirit world. Companions, not just in the hunt, but in dream and ritual. Some were believed to guide souls beyond this world. Others were honored with their own ceremonies, their own place and sacred stories. In the plains and the forests, they helped pull travois, small wood carriers draped behind them. They carried food, tools, small children from one seasonal home to the next. In the Andes, tiny dogs found homes in mountain villages, curling in blankets during cool nights, alert and comforting companions. High above sea level, they watched llamas, warned of strangers, and shared warmth through harsh winters. In each climate, from blistering heat to biting frost, dogs adapted, not only in body, but in purpose. Their shape changed, their coats changed, but what stayed constant was the bond. A quiet language between human and dog, told not in words, but steps, touches, long moments of mutual watching. When storms came, or herds scattered, or shadows fell long across unfamiliar land, that bond held. It still holds. From frozen lakes to dry red earth, dogs have been guardians, helpers, and quiet companions. Their roles have shifted with place, with time, but across every border and belief, they remain by our side, listening, watching, and waiting, always willing to walk a little further with us, across deserts and mountains, through twilight and snow, until the quiet finds us and the night settles in. Over time, the hands of humans have quietly guided the course of evolution, not with force, but with preference. Artificial selection is an old and patient craft. It's the soft shaping of one life form by another, a kind of gentle persuasion, guided by need, by beauty, by dreams of what could be. It begins so simply, A shepherd watching over a flock may notice a dog that moves smoother than the rest, eyes sharp, steps nimble. That dog, he thinks, would sire fine pups, and so, the choice is made. On the farm, in the garden, and by the hearthside, people have long favored plants and animals that fit their world a little better. Sweeter apples, woollery sheep, faster horses. Choices made, again and again, decade over decade, until those quiet preferences become visible in form. Sometimes it's about utility, other times, it's about the comfort of companionship. Humans bred dogs not only to herd or guard, but also to sit at our feet, to share fireside warmth on long winter nights. Their size, their ears, the length of their coats, shaped deliberately, like the careful brushstrokes on a portrait, from the sturdiness of the bulldog to the fine-boned grace of the Afghan hound. Each breed tells a story of human affection and intention. Cats, once feral shadows in the corners of grain stores, slowly warmed their way into the lap of royalty. Sleek Siamese, plush Persians, personalities as distinct as their coats. Each breed, a whispered echo of some ancient choice. We see it in farm animals too. Feathers selected for color, chickens that lay more eggs, or eggs tinted blue. Hogs broader in back, cows gentler at the milking pail. Choices born of need, of familiarity, of generations touching generations. But it isn't always the practical that survives. Sometimes, it's delight. The joyful quirk of a curled tail, the charming tilt of a head. When we find comfort in a trait, it tends to stay. This long companionship has led to unexpected things. Animals now understand our voice, our gestures, even our moods. Over time, their brains shifted too. Traits selected by us, but also shaped by the closeness of life lived together. Artificial selection is often quiet, but its effects are deeply felt. It reveals a bond not only of biology, but of trust. Because in choosing, we guide, and in guiding, we become custodians, caretakers of stories written in fur, in feather, in the curve of a beak, or the glint of a curious eye. Our fingerprints, ever soft and lasting, live on in the creatures that walk beside us. And just as we shape them, they shape us in return. Often, with nothing more than a look, or the simple comfort of being there, beside us. Painted in brushstrokes soft as silk, or etched in pages yellowed with time, the image of the dog remains with us, loyal, comforting, ever present. In the quiet galleries of history, where heavy frames line the walls like windows to another age, you'll often find a canine staring back, sometimes regal, posed beside a noble master in lace and velvet. Sometimes playful, caught mid-bound in a sun-dappled field. These are more than decorative flourishes. More than background figures, they are portraits of companionship. Lapdogs nestled on silk cushions in the parlors of the 18th century offered more than warmth. They symbolized refinement, and the tender indulgence of a certain kind of love. In portraits of young ladies with powdered wigs and pale hands, a pearl-white bichon might doze in her lap, its presence softening the formality of the pose, making the moment feel lived in, not just arranged. The tiny paws and button noses served as a counterpoint to all the grandeur, and still, in royal portraits, majestic hounds at attention, their gaze fixed forward, unwavering, a mirror of the sitter's pride and honor. Hunting breeds like greyhounds and spaniels were more than symbols of sport. They stood for heritage, for noble purpose. Yet, beyond image and style, there's always something deeper. In art, the dog is not just a pet, but a message, an emblem. They speak silently of loyalty, the kind that endures not just through battlefields and journeys, but through the hush of domestic life. In the 17th century, Dutch artists often painted dogs curled under tables, beside softly glowing hearths. They witnessed the hush of everyday life, private moments, a meal shared in quiet. And still, they waited. The dog became a symbol, not just of devotion, but of quiet guardianship. In literature, they take on voices of their own, sometimes named, sometimes known only by their deeds. Think of Argos, the faithful hound in Homer's Odyssey. After 20 long years, he lies waiting at the gates of Ithaca, blind with age, and heavy with years. Yet the moment Odysseus returns, disgust though he is, Argos knows, in that final breath of music, by free speech and candid recognition, we see the dog not only as friend, but as a memory keeper, silent, but never forgetful. Charles Dickens knew what he was doing when he gave dogs a place among his cast. From Bullseye, the snarling shadow of Bill Sikes, to the mild companion of David Copperfield, each furry presence carries weight. They advance the heart of the story, reflecting both the tenderness and cruelty we are capable of. Jack London took it even further with his tales, where the lines between man and dog blur. In The Call of the Wild and White Fang, we watch his dogs become avatars of instinct, of triumph, of suffering endured in silence, and always of courage. They survive the unknown, they guide others home. Throughout centuries, cultures have returned again and again to the same lesson, that to walk with a dog is not to command them, but to be accompanied. Through narrow city streets, or across wild moors cloaked in fog, they keep step beside us, wordless in the way only true comfort can be. On stone sarcophagi, carved dogs sleep at the feet of knights, laid in eternal rest beside those they guarded in life, and perhaps beyond. It's no accident. It's an artist's quiet tribute to loyalty that doesn't waver. Eternal, even in stillness. Whether painted in oils or told in verse, the dog remains steady, in fur and frame, ink and memory. They are not only muse or metaphor, but part of the story we continue to tell. A story of devotion, of love without question, and presence without condition, always, right there, beside us. There are stories that lie quietly between the pages of history, and some walk on four paws. In the stillness of war-torn fields, among broken trees and ruined villages, a different kind of soldier found its path. The dog, sent into war not with weapons, but with instinct, training, and an unwavering sense of duty. Tonight, I'll take you with me into the quiet roles they played, roles threaded with bravery and kindness in both world wars. Let's begin in the mud-soaked trenches of the First World War. Messenger dogs, small, fast, and trained to carry vital messages across fields where no human dared run. Between artillery fire and tangled barbed wire, they dashed across no man's land, guided only by memory and scent. A dog named Satan ran through a volley of shells to deliver a message that saved an entire battalion. Satan, a creature of gentleness, sent straight into the storm. Others were trained not only to run, but to find, to search. Search dogs, sniffing out the wounded beneath collapsed earth, under shattered timber, behind cover where medics couldn't see. They would bark softly, or lie beside the fallen until help arrived. They didn't ask why or how, only stayed until someone else could come. Some brought not messages or direction, but comfort. Curled in the corner of a dugout, lying atop cold boots, they were warmth in a world grown bitter. Soldiers wrote of them in letters home, how a dog's sleepy breath, how the nudge of a damp nose, would remind them of home far away. The trenches smothered so much light, but even the smallest tail wag could brighten the gloom. Loyalty was in every thread of their training. In France, Belgium, and fields dusted with ash, they were taught not just to obey, but to stay, to return, again and again. In thick forests and shelled valleys, they listened, they watched, patrolled beside their handlers in complete silence. In the Second World War, the training deepened. Dogs became parachutists, scouts, sentries. They learned how to distinguish footsteps on gravel, the difference between a friend and an intruder, the stillness before a whistle blew. A collie named Rob parachuted into battle over 20 times, serving in North Africa and Italy. A dog named Chips broke loose during an attack, charging an enemy machine gun nest and helping to force a surrender. But even among all the courage, there remained a kind of quietness in them, a patience and peace that humans had long since lost. Some were brought home after the war, given medals, or just a quiet place by the hearth. Others, along with their handlers, were left behind in the closed silence of history's folds. But their presence still lingers, in old stories told softly by veterans, in photographs where soft eyes stare out from shadowed corners, in statues weathered by rain and time. You won't see them on the covers of books or the echoes of parades, but in war they served, and in peace they were remembered. A friend in 2 wars, walking side by side, always forward. The war ended, and no matter where people had been, in trenches, in factories, or waiting at windows, they wanted something still, something safe. They came home, and they built homes. Brick by brick, street by street, the suburbs began to stretch outward like soft arms around the aging cities. And on these new lawns, in these new neighborhoods, dogs began to take on a different kind of role, not as hunters, nor guards at the gates, but as companions, housemates, and playmates, no longer tied to barns or led through fields, but curled up alongside children, chasing tennis balls along sidewalks, sitting at kitchen doors as meals cooked inside. It was a change that happened slowly, but it settled deeply into things. In post-war homes, where prosperity lingered in the corners of tidy living rooms, dogs became part of a dream. A family of 4, and a dog. It was a new image, quiet but steady, found in picture books, in family photos, in neighborhood strolls at twilight. A Labrador with a red collar padding along by the heel of a laughing child. A terrier barking excitedly as bicycles wheeled past. The dog had entered not just the home, but the heart of its rhythms. In this new space, the dog was both participant and observer. There when a child took their first steps. There when they cried after falling. Dogs listened without judgment, rested beside growing minds, and kept secrets that no one else could hear. They had become more than animals, more than pets. They were memory keepers. The smell of fur in sunlit dens, the wag of a tail after school, the quiet companionship on long sick days. Ask anyone who grew up in those suburbs, and they'll tell you about their first dog, usually by name, always by smile. Patch, Daisy, Max. Names repeated in remembering, like lullabies, each syllable rich with feeling. Dogs became mirrors for childhood. They didn't judge or instruct. They just were, present, real, offering silent comfort to young hearts learning how to feel. And the grown-ups, they were drawn in too, taught to sit still again, to laugh at the silly things a dog might do, chasing a garden hose, dreaming with twitching paws on the rug. In these homes, dogs answered a human longing, not born of necessity, but of affection. By mid-century, dogs wore collars with engraved tags. They had snacks from stovetops, pictures on mantles. They were walked not by duty, but by ritual. A time for quiet, a time for calm. Between dinner plates cleared and bedrooms lighted down, so much of life was shaped around them, even when no one quite noticed it. Dogs, they'd followed us from wild woods and working fields. Now, they followed us into bedrooms as we turned off the lamp, pausing at our feet, making circles on the carpet before settling in, their breathing soft, their presence known. The rhythm of family, beating in step with 4 padded feet. Not all was perfect back then. Not every dog was free from hardship. But the role had changed, rooted deeper in emotion, trust, and unspoken care. Just as sidewalks curved gently toward front doors, so did the bond curve toward the heart. Dogs became sleep listeners, play partners, quiet watchers of childhood's seasons. And in return, they were woven into our stories. Often, the first face a child would remember loving, and perhaps the last goodbye they would not quite understand. They helped teach too. Without lesson plans, without words, they showed children how to comfort, how to be patient, how to grieve, how to laugh loudly and sit quietly, side by side on porch steps, while the sun went down and fireflies began to blink in sleepy waves. The soft shuffle of paws down a hospital hallway, the slight tap of claws on tile, and then a moment of stillness. A golden retriever, eyes warm and gentle, rests beside the hospital bed. Her presence isn't intrusive, it's quiet, like moonlight slipping between window blinds. Her name might be Clover, or Benny, or Jasper, but names don't matter as much as presence. She's a therapy dog, trained not to fix, but to soothe. In the warmth of her fur, a child finds the courage to face one more round of treatment. In the calm of her gaze, a grieving relative breathes in and then out. Slower this time. Dogs like her know something unspoken. The language of silence. The comfort of just being there. Some are trained to respond to trauma and anxiety, placing a paw on a trembling shoulder, curling beside someone during moments of mental unrest. They do it without fanfare, without words. Just a breath, a heartbeat, fur against skin. In clinics, in rehabilitation centers, in quiet rooms behind busy emergency doors, these gentle animals move through human hardship with great softness. Each touch of their nose is like a reminder, you're not alone. And for those with physical challenges, service dogs walk even closer. Guiding steps, fetching medicine, pressing buttons with practiced gentleness. They learn to open doors, both literal and, sometimes emotional ones too. There's a Labrador trained to sense drops in blood sugar, occasionally alerting its human before they even know. There's a German Shepherd who studies their partner during every rise from a chair or stair. Their work is precision, wrapped in kindness, skill, resting beneath companionship. These dogs are graduates, students once of patient, repetitive teaching. Their schools are quiet places, where instinct is shaped, and the natural love they carry is given purpose. And when they finally don their vests, they do so with pride that they do not wear like humans. They simply are. There, when needed, and often before. I once spoke with a woman who lived with chronic pain. Her dog, Willow, had been matched with her 5 years ago. Willow could detect pain flares coming before her posture changed, before her breathing shifted. I never thought an animal could know me so well, she said. But animals don't need to know in the way we do. They feel. Dogs, especially, are close students of us. Maybe closer than we care to admit. In pediatric oncology wards, therapy dogs are often present during IV changes and procedures. Their presence doesn't flash or distract. It's more like grounding light. One tiny child, facing a long row of treatments, would only let the nurses begin if his favorite golden retriever was sitting at his feet. The needles still hurt, but their company made the burden feel somehow less. Hospitals are designed for efficiency, for surgery and scans, but dogs are present for something else. Healing that doesn't show on charts or graphs, but lingers in the way a hand clings to fur. They remind people to breathe, to smile, to reach forward into the day. Each one has a story, a journey, and a bond. And when their working lives are done, many live on as beloved companions, retiring with grace into the homes of the very people they've served. Their healing doesn't stop, it just deepens. Gently now, we let go of the day. We picture padded feet along quiet tiles, a soft sigh as a dog curls up by someone's side, a paw on the shoulder, and with that small gesture, some hearts begin to mend. More soon. But for now, rest easy. And feel the warmth at your side. The hum of the screen, the gentle tap of fingers across glass. It's a quiet rhythm many of us know by instinct now. Scrolling slowly, pausing, smiling at the sight of a fluffy friend in a sweater, or a golden retriever lifting a paw in perfect sync with its owner. In this part of our journey, we rest for a while, with one of the most comforting threads that winds through the modern world, the digital lives of our dogs. They are more than shadows in the background, more than casual companions in candid shots. Today, dogs are stars in their own right. You've likely seen them, the internet's most famous canines, with names as familiar as old friends. There's the cheerful corgi with the permanent grin, the sleepy basset hound draped across a velvet couch, the sprightly terrier who seems to dance through every video with unfiltered delight. Millions follow them, not just for laughs, but for a sense of lightness. They remind us, gently, of all that's soft around the edges. Their presence online has changed how we see them, and how we share our own dogs with the world. Social media, once built for people, has made space for paws. Accounts with pastel palettes, curated stories, and captions that translate tail wags into human thoughts. Some of these animals have publicists, calendars, even merchandise. It might sound extravagant, and sometimes it is. But underneath, there's something simple happening. A sharing of joy, bite-sized and honest. Even dogs who aren't famous bring comfort to circles of followers, close friends, scattered family, or simply strangers who need a distraction. In the calm scroll of posts and reels, dogs become little windows of peace. But it isn't only social feeds where their paws leave prints. You'll notice them in commercials, wandering playfully through quiet kitchens, curled up beside boots, trotting loyally down sidewalks. Advertisers have long known what many feel, that dogs carry trust with them. They soften a message, thread warmth through even the simplest moments. When a dog steps into frame, we tend to breathe easier. In movies, they're sidekicks and heroes. Whether animated or real, dogs offer more than just comic relief. They offer grounding, a presence that steadies the scene. And when they are the heart of the story, well, stories with dogs are rarely about language. They're told in glances, moments of waiting, tails thumping. And so, in this digital age, dogs still play their ageless role, companions in silence and in attention. Technology has also brought us closer to our own companions. With GPS collars, we know where they are. Through camera apps, we check in on them midday, see them sleeping on the rug, or watching the birds outside. Automatic feeders send food at just the right time. There are virtual vet chats, barking alerts, pup playlists when you're away. Some of it might sound too far, gadgets with blinking lights and sterile tones. But at the core, these tools whisper a yearning to feel nearby, even in distance. We look at our screens and hope they feel our care stretch through the glass. And they do, in their way. Even a voice message, played through a pet monitor, can make ears twitch and tails stir. The essence of it isn't new. It's the same old love, just carried on new wires. As we drift toward rest tonight, it's a soft thought to cradle. That even in this wired world, our connection with dogs continues on, untangled by time or platform. They're near us, in more forms than ever. Still steady, still simple, still deeply known. Just a paw print between the pixels. In the quiet of the evening, when the world slows its breath, I often think about the small ways our companions speak, not just with bark or growl, but with gaze and gesture and the shifts in posture that tell more than any word might. Dogs have been with us for thousands of years, and in that long companionship, a new language was formed between us. Not a language of syllables and grammar, but one of presence, of emotion, and finely tuned instinct. You see it in the way a dog leans into a human touch, or the way ears fall back when they're unsure. or the soft wag of a tail when familiarity returns. Body language isn't just decoration in a dog's world. It is the message itself. A quiet yawn can mean nervousness, not sleep. A raised paw isn't always play. Sometimes it's hesitation. A soft gaze, held just long enough, carries trust. We, who so often rely on words, are drawn into this unspoken world when we live beside them. And over time, we begin to read it, just as they read us. This rhythm of bodies in quiet conversation is the soul of our bond. And when it comes to training, many have misunderstood it. There was once an idea that dogs needed to be dominated, that guidance came best from hierarchy and force. The notion borrowed from misread observations of wolves, and the assumptions followed. But dogs are not walls, and they aren't soldiers meant to be commanded. They are partners, soft in spirit, shaped by thousands of years of coexistence with humans. They look to us not as alphas, but as companions, and often as sources of safety. Understanding their emotions, their stress, their joys and fears, is the foundation of gentle guidance, not through punishment, but by reinforcing communication, reward, patience, timing. These shape behavior in a way that respects the relationship, not rules it. We pause when a dog hesitates. We wait when they need assurance. And we celebrate their understanding in their time and at their pace. Because trust grows when listened to. And they do listen to us, more deeply than many realize. A dog can learn hundreds of human words, but more than that, they learn our tone, our gestures, our energy, and intent. They learn to match our sadness, or to share in our joy. There are stories of dogs awakening their humans during medical episodes, alerting to anxiety attacks before they begin, knowing, somehow, before we do. It is not magic, it is observation, mirrored emotion, and the uninterrupted closeness they've held with us for so long. Empathy, in its quietest form. And we feel it too, the ease of being with a companion who does not judge us, who sees the core of our emotion and chooses to stay nearby. Sometimes, the simple presence of our dog on the couch beside us says more than hours of conversation. They know how we feel, not from words, but by reading our breath, our movement, and the way we carry ourselves. It is a shared intuition, something humans and dogs shaped together over millennia of mutual trust. And in this mutual reading, in this reciprocal language, lies the quiet miracle of our companionship. We are not so different. We both look to one another with longing, with affection, sometimes with need. In the silence between words, we listen. In the small gestures, we answer. And in this, we are understood. The night has settled, soft and cool, and here, in this quiet moment, we return to an age-old bond, gentle and enduring, between humankind and the dog. It's a companionship that reaches so far back, it slips beyond pages and into the silence of prehistory. Back when the world was lit only by fire and shadows danced on cave walls. There, beside figures etched in ochre and charcoal, curled close against the cold, was the earliest form of a friend, not tamed by trick or chains, but drawn near by something older, Kinship, perhaps, or the shared rhythm of surviving night after night. Dogs did not arrive in our lives out of force. They came of choice, by scenting trust, in flickers just bright enough to believe. They lingered at the edge of the fire, and we welcomed the warmth of their presence. Thousands of years have passed since then, and yet they remain, not as beasts, not as tools, but as hearts with four legs, that still remember. They are echoes of a time when we needed each other to live, and now we stay with each other simply to love. The bond became more than sharing scraps. It became a language all its own, unspoken, steady, and sacred. Over generations, dogs have become woven into the very fabric of human life. Through wars and winters, through birth and passing, they are there, not with promises, but presence. Paws pressed into mud beside our footprints, lying at our feet as we read or remember. They are quiet witnesses to our days, and often, when words fail us, they do not. A nuzzle in grief, a tail's gentle rhythm, reminders that love doesn't always need to be spoken aloud. In their eyes, there is a kind of knowing, not of facts or figures, but of feeling, of staying, of waiting, of belonging. The earliest bond may have been rooted in what we both could offer, warmth and watchfulness. But what grew from that is something else entirely. Something that doesn't wilt with time, that doesn't harden or hush with season. Even now, in cities where stars do not break through the light, on quiet farms where morning dew still clings to each blade of grass, wherever humans tread, there is often the soft pad of paws beside them, as though following us from the cave to the cradle and beyond. Dogs do not ask for legacy, yet hold memory better than most. They remember the sound of laughter in a house long quiet, their weighted doors that haven't opened in years. They are timekeepers of love and loss, carrying each affection as though it was the first and the last. To know a dog is to hold a thread to ages past, and to feel, even in the stillness of dusk, that you are never truly alone. In that way, they are not just our companions, they are the quieter halves of our history. Walking and watching, trusting and tethered, bound not by leash or law, but by something deeper still. Tomorrow may change the world again, as it has so many times. But through it all, this bond we share endures. It waits softly at the door of time, tail curled, eyes half closed, and still, always listening. The house is still now, only the soft hush of the wind outside, and the gentle creak of old wood whispering with memory. In the quiet, a steady breath beside me, warm, comforting, familiar. A friend, not of many words, but of silent understanding, lying nearby, perhaps curled at the foot of the bed, or nestled on a cozy rug near the hearth. Their presence, as natural as the fading twilight. There's something tender in the way a companion breathes when the day is done. Each inhale, a trace of every moment spent, and each exhale, a lullaby in fur and warmth. As I rest my thoughts, I remember the gentle rhythm of shared time. Walks through fallen leaves, idle afternoons in the sun. Quiet nights like this one, where no words were needed. Companionship that speaks not through stories, but through being, through presence, patient, constant, serene. It reminds me of how every movement holds history, every wag of a tail, Every tilt of a head holds echoes of places we've been, days we've weathered, and joys we've quietly celebrated. A friend like this, they hold space, in the room, in the heart, and in dreams. I hear the soft thump of a paw adjusting, then stillness again. They are here, just here, and that is enough. Night is different when you know you are not alone. It drapes more gently, it listens with you, and sleep finds its way to you. As you follow the trail of calm they silently lay, I let my mind wander back through all we've shared, the old paths and quiet fields, the way time slows when loyalty curls close beside you. So many memories folded into a single night's breath. And now, when words grow soft and the house sighs into stillness, I let go. Because with a friend nearby, dreams feel safer, the darkness less heavy. I drift, not from the world, but deeper into it, into the slow-rolling hills of sleep and memory. Tonight isn't about telling a tale, but resting in one. A chapter written in footsteps and faithful looks, in trust built without a sentence. This is a good place, a place to rest, to sleep, to say thank you, not in voice, but in presence. And so, with the soft breathing beside me, I close my eyes and settle into the hush that friendship brings. May your night be gentle, and your sleep full of peace.